In September 1984, 17-year-old Kurt McFall seemed to have his whole life ahead of him. Tall, athletic, with a love for art and medieval reenactments, Kurt was a bright and creative teenager living in Concord, California, a quiet suburb east of San Francisco. Friends described him as friendly and adventurous, someone who loved camping, hiking, and exploring new ideas. But in the months leading up to his death, Kurt had become fascinated with something unusual, a local group that blended historical role-playing with alleged occult rituals. It was through this group that Kurt met people who would later be linked to the final days of his life. On the weekend of September 7th, 1984, Kurt left home telling his father he was going camping with friends. Instead, he was headed toward the Marin Headlands, a rugged coastal area just north of San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. It was the last time his father saw him alive. 2 days later, a fisherman walking along the beach at Fort Funston, nearly 20 miles away, discovered a body lying in the sand. It was Kurt. His clothes were soaked, and his body bore strange injuries. But no one could agree on how he had ended up there. In the days after Kurt's body was found, investigators began piecing together his final movements. Witnesses placed him in the Marin Headlands on the afternoon of September 7th, accompanied by members of the historical reenactment group he had recently joined. This wasn't your typical weekend hobby club. While much of what they did involved costumes, swordplay, and medieval fairs, rumors swirled that some members practiced occult rituals under the guise of historical authenticity. To this day, no one has been able to confirm exactly how deep those practices went, or whether Kurt had been involved in them. That evening, Kurt reportedly stayed overnight in a remote coastal area with at least one other person from the group. The next morning, a hiker saw him walking alone along a cliffside trail. That was the last confirmed sighting before his body washed ashore at Fort Funston. When the autopsy results came back, they raised more questions than answers. Kurt had injuries consistent with a fall, bruising and abrasions, but there was no clear evidence of drowning. Some investigators believed he had fallen from the cliffs near the ocean. Others suspected he had been injured elsewhere and placed in the water afterward. His father, Jerry McFall, was convinced from the start that Kurt's death was not an accident. He described his son as a strong swimmer, experienced in the outdoors, and unlikely to have ventured near dangerous cliffs without a reason. If Kurt hadn't fallen by mistake, then someone had to be responsible. As detectives dug deeper into Kurt's social circle, one name kept coming up: the medieval reenactment group he had been spending more and more time with. To outsiders, they looked like enthusiastic history buffs, gathering in public parks for sword fights, archery practice, and camping trips. But among those who knew the group more intimately, there were whispers of something darker. Former members claimed that some gatherings involved secret nighttime ceremonies, rituals inspired by paganism, mysticism, and in some cases outright occult symbolism. Whether these were genuine beliefs or simply role-playing taken too far was unclear. Kurt's father, Jerry, learned that on the weekend of his son's death, the group had been camping in the Marin Headlands. Witnesses recalled Kurt looking nervous or out of place during parts of the evening. One friend later told police that Kurt had confided in him about feeling uncomfortable with certain activities the group was doing, but the details of that conversation were never made public. Police attempted to question several members, but cooperation was minimal. Some flat out refused to speak. Others claimed they had nothing to do with Kurt's death, and that they left the campsite before anything happened. No physical evidence connected the group to the body found at Fort Funston, but the timeline, the secrecy, and Kurt's unease kept the suspicion alive. And then there was the matter of the missing personal items. Kurt's wallet, identification, and some of his clothes were never recovered. If this was simply an accident, why were these things gone? For Jerry McFall, the official investigation into his son's death felt incomplete from the very start. The authorities were quick to label it an accident, a tragic fall from the cliffs into the ocean. But to Jerry, too many things didn't add up. Why was Kurt's body found nearly 20 miles from the last place he was seen? Why was there no clear evidence of drowning? And why were key personal items, including his wallet and some clothing, missing? Unsatisfied with the answers he was getting, Jerry began his own search for the truth. He retraced Kurt's last known steps, visiting the Marin Headlands and speaking to anyone who might have seen his son. He questioned members of the reenactment group, pushing them for details about that weekend's events. Some avoided him entirely, others gave vague or contradictory stories. Jerry also uncovered an unsettling fact. Kurt had been talking to friends about leaving the group just days before his death. If there had been tension or conflict, could it have escalated into something deadly? Over the years, Jerry gathered binders full of notes, photographs, and witness statements. He even hired private investigators to re-examine the case. But no matter how hard he pushed, the trail always seemed to go cold. Still, Jerry refused to believe his son simply fell to his death. In his mind, someone knew exactly what had happened and was keeping it a secret. Decades later, the death of Kurt McFall remains one of the most puzzling cases in the Bay Area's history. While the official explanation, an accidental fall from the cliffs, is simple on paper, it leaves behind a long list of troubling questions. Theory 1. An accident in the headlands. Supporters of this theory believe Kurt was exploring the rugged terrain of the Marin Headlands, lost his footing, and fell into the ocean. The strong currents then carried his body south to Fort Funston, where it washed ashore. But critics point out that Kurt was an experienced outdoorsman and swimmer, and the distance between the locations makes this scenario less likely without signs of drowning. Theory 2. Foul play involving the group. Some believe that Kurt's death was directly connected to the reenactment group and its alleged occult activities. If he had expressed a desire to leave, or if he had witnessed something he shouldn't have, it's possible that confrontation turned deadly. The missing personal items and the group's reluctance to cooperate only fuel this suspicion. Theory 3. An unknown third party. Another possibility is that Kurt encountered someone unrelated to the group while in the remote headlands. The area was, and still is, known for its isolated trails, occasional crime, and the presence of strangers camping off the grid. Could he have met with violence from someone else entirely? The unsettling details. No matter the theory, several facts remain hard to explain. No definitive cause of death was determined. Kurt's belongings were never found. The location of the body doesn't match the last confirmed sighting. For Jerry McFall, these unanswered questions have kept the case alive in his mind for nearly 4 decades. To him, the lack of closure is as painful as the loss itself. Nearly 40 years after that September weekend, the death of Kurt McFall remains unsolved. There have been no arrests, no confessions, and no new evidence strong enough to close the case. In Concord, California, Kurt's name is still remembered by friends, classmates, and those who followed the strange circumstances of his final days. His father, Jerry, continued to search for the truth well into his later years, speaking to reporters, podcasters, and anyone willing to listen. He often said that the hardest part wasn't the grief, it was the uncertainty. Over time, the case of Kurt McFall has become a quiet legend among true crime enthusiasts. A story passed around in forums and late-night discussions where theories multiply and facts blur into speculation. Was it a tragic accident, a confrontation gone wrong, or something far stranger, hidden in the shadows of the Marin Headlands? Until someone steps forward with the truth, we are left with only questions and the haunting image of a young life cut short under circumstances no one can fully explain. If this story left you thinking, you're not alone. Cases like Kurt McFall's remind us how quickly a mystery can take root and how the search for answers can span decades. If you want to explore more true crime stories like this one, subscribe to Vanishing Echoes. We uncover the cases you've never heard of and revisit the ones you can't forget. Hit the bell icon so you won't miss the next mystery.